Sheriff Richard Mack, again, who was a sheriff down there and knows all these players. What is it like? I mean, because I know you're doing the research, but I've seen all over the news that he was talking about killing people at college. The police had been to his house. Why didn't they execute a search warrant? Why hadn't he been put in psychiatric care, or was he? We're not being told that. I mean, they're acting very suspicious. This sheriff won't talk about what they've got out of his safe. And then won't say it's proof that it's right-wing. I mean, you know, this... Right. Sounds like a lot's going on here when he's got a full-bore black magic temple in his backyard.
Well, I would like to first ask the sheriff, why aren't you going after the people who got him the marijuana? He wasn't growing his own, so let's find out who his drug source was. Let's arrest them for being accomplices, and maybe we should make laws against marijuana. Oh, whoops, it's already against the law. He couldn't get marijuana. It's against the law. Yeah, he was a pothead. He was a kook. And we don't believe that he was ever institutionalized because he was able to buy a gun just a few months ago, and he had to do obviously go through the criminal background check from the Sports Authority where he bought the gun. So most of those, but again, some mental history records are not immediately available to those kinds of checks, even though the FBI has tried to increase those and put them on their list. Those are a little bit more difficult to deal with, even for the FBI and all their...
Well, we also know they're already trying to use it against military veterans, so they're going to use it as a discriminatory system. I'd rather just have the people be armed to defend ourselves from loons. Well,
absolutely. And the whole thing is... the leaders, including Sheriff Dupnik and our own Congress, are going to use this to take guns away from you and me. Innocent, law-abiding citizens are going to pay the price for this because they're going to come after us. Now, Arizona just recently, this might be another spoke on the wheel here of this whole story. Arizona just 6 months ago went to a constitutional form of Second Amendment adherence. We no longer require permits of any kind. You can carry open or concealed. No money, no fees, no licenses, no permits, no asking mother, may I.
And that's Vermont style. You know, if this would have been a Republican rally, I'll guarantee you half the people would have been packing, and he would have been shot down even faster.
He wouldn't have got the second shot off if the people I know in Tucson that are just the normal Tea Party groups and the gun rights groups, if any of them had been there, this guy would have never shot that little girl.
Oh, it makes me sick. And now they're going to try to use her murder to take our sacred First Amendment and Second Amendment. But her father, have you heard this, Sheriff Mack? I'll ask you when we come back in 60 seconds. Her father came out and said, don't take people's liberties over her death. Well, the World Socialist website is saying Arizona assassination spree tied to political right. Oh, really? Well, his favorite book was a Communist Manifesto, and he liked to dress up like a woman. The Grim Reaper was called Very Liberal by his friends. I mean, just incredible. Sheriff Mack, I've got the New American Magazine here in front of me. This is linked up on InfoWars and Prison Planet. ATF plans registration in border states. Now they're trying to extrajudicially say they want, when people buy rifles, for it to be reported to the ATF, not just go through the NICS system. But the statistics I've read, most of the weapons being used by drug cartels down there are being bought from the military themselves. They're fully auto, and there's hand grenades and stuff.
Yeah, all that's true, and I guarantee you that none of the things that they want to do as far as registration or more background checks or more any kind of checks would have stopped this. That's why they have to take this, Alex, to the next level, and they've got to confiscate guns. That's the only thing that will have any appeasement to these gun grabbers. And, boy, we better be watching out because this is a direct hit at the Second Amendment.
Well, I mean, regardless of who's really behind it, it looks staged. I mean, I've never seen them come out of the closet as tyrants but they even want the First Amendment. They say anything that could be construed as making someone else angry is going to be banned.
That's right, and so that means they're coming after you, they're coming after me, they're coming after the Tea Party movement, and it's really an amazing process how these things are exploited. And just as you mentioned, the little green girl's father said, you're not going to exploit my daughter's death to promote your own political liberal agenda. agenda, and especially to go after more gun control. What a great man.
Yeah, if one of my daughters was gunned down, I'll guarantee you 48 hours later, I would probably not even be able to talk. But you hear him break up and crack up, and it just tears my guts out.
It does me as well. I've shed tears over this over the weekend several times, especially when I knew it was that little girl, and especially Judge John Roll. Judge John Roll changed my life. A lot of what he did is what I'm doing now, because of what he did and what he stood for and what he said is in my books.
No, you always talk about him.
And in my presentation.
You always talk about him when you're on the show.
Every time. Every time. Yes.
And a guy who likes to wear women's clothes and dress up like the Grim Reaper has killed him, and then we get to be blamed for it.
Absolutely astonishing that they can make that big of a turn, but when you get liberals who will not comply with principles of freedom, who will not comply with their oath of office, who now read the Constitution and then make fun of it afterwards, you know where this type of stuff can come from.
Unbelievable. We're about to go to break. Long segment coming up. We're going to take calls, but any other pieces of info you want to talk about dealing with Judge Roll?
Yes. On page 2 of my little book, he says this, and this is what I've quoted on your show numerous times. I'm reading right out of my book. Federal District Judge John Roll, Mack is thus forced to choose between keeping his oath or obeying the law, subjecting himself to possible sanctions. He was really worried about the sanctions that were going after me. He protected me because they said in the Brady bill that they would arrest me if I failed to comply, or any other sheriff. And so Judge Roll stood up for me in particular because I was the only one filing the lawsuit at that time.
Isn't that interesting? You get this conservative Democrat, you get this federal patriot judge killed by this ultra-liberal, and it's so convenient now the media gets to blame it on the Tea Party. Boy, isn't that convenient? That's very... And he's running around everywhere saying he's under mind control. But we're just supposed to ignore that, huh, Sheriff?
Yeah, let's just don't look at the man behind the curtain.
I'd like to know who his psychiatrist was. We'll be right back. Representative Carolyn McCarthy, whose husband and son were killed on that commuter train back in the early 90s by that other lunatic. It was done in an area where it's a victim disarmament zone, no guns allowed predominantly in many areas of the state, but 100% gun ban on that train. You notice these people love generally to go where it's a school or some other place where they know people aren't going to be armed. So they can carry out their ghoulish deed. And as the culture and the media hypes it and hypes it, mentally ill people get the idea, well, I'll go commit suicide by waving a gun around on the Brooklyn Bridge, and the cops will come and shoot me. And that's what this guy talked about. He talked about his assassination, how the police would then assassinate him. But that didn't happen. This lunatic's now going to be in a supermax prison for the rest of his life, and probably executed after a few decades of that. But McCarthy readies gun control bill, and in her bill, she says, and we will not allow him to have an arsenal of ammunition like he had. So she says, not only will semi-automatic guns of any type be banned in the bill she's about to introduce, but she went on to say that he will not be allowed to have the amount of ammo he had. So I guess now having 18 rounds is a arsenal. I guess you get one bullet, kind of like Australia, Richard Mack?
Yeah, I saw her comments. I've actually debated her back during the Brady bill times. She is a woman who cares nothing about history. She cares nothing about the rule of law. She believes that gun control somehow would have made her family safer. Well, they already had gun control, just as you mentioned, extreme gun control. So the only thing, as we were pointing out earlier, Alex, that can take this to the next level is not more background checks. The only thing can be confiscation and complete gun control, which means innocent, law-abiding citizens will not be able to get these.
But then that doesn't work in Mexico. They've got a crime rate off the charts compared to us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, Mexico is a war zone, and citizens are not allowed to have guns there. No one is. And yet it is a war zone there. And, in fact, the drug war has destroyed that country, almost completely stopping tourism in the northern part of the area because people are afraid to go down there anymore.
Well, here's a quote. Here's a quote by McCarthy. She says that my staff is working on looking at different legislation fixes that we might be able to do to introduce as early as today. That was yesterday. She said tomorrow. She goes on here to say that many said that people with a history of mental instability, like the alleged shooter, Jared Lee Loughner, should not be able to buy a gun. Well, I mean, how do you know beforehand? And no one should be able to buy stockpiles of ammunition used by the 22-year-old assailant. He had 18 rounds of... So that's a stockpile now? What does that mean?
It means you and I are in trouble and other law-abiding citizens. We are the ones that they're going to attack. This is something that they are loving to exploit what this was for their own gun control liberal agenda. And that's why I told my son, I know darn well who this shooter is, because this is something that they had to have happen.
We got a lot of phone calls here. We're going to continue with phone calls right through Larry Pratt coming up in about 30 minutes. And I'm going to go into the fourth hour today as well. Make sure we get to everybody, because I've got a lot of other points that I haven't made yet. And I want to speak directly to the gun grabbers coming up briefly in the start of the next hour. But right now, I want to hurry through these. Question or quick comment for Sheriff Richard Mack. John in Texas, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. You know, Australia, Canada, and Britain used to have the same gun rights we did, but because of the same cookie-cutter, lone deranged gunman, now they lost all their rights. And not only that, they have free speech restrictions there now, too, where you can't say certain things or they put you in jail. They're almost what I call soft-core communist police states. And that's what the globalists have really got designed for this country. They got to have gun control. We're the last country besides us and Switzerland are the only two countries where they have free access to the guns, so they got to have an excuse to get them out of our hands.
And a few years ago, they had a psychiatric patient go into one of their state governments and kill a bunch of people. I mean, how many times do we have to see this repeat itself over and over and over again? It's very suspicious. Anything else, John?
No, that's just about it.
Sheriff Mack, your comments on what John just said.
Well, he's absolutely correct, and everything that has failed in Europe, we now want to embrace in America, and our leaders here are doing it, including the one that led us in a moment of prayer this morning from the White House lawn.
Disgusting. He just prays that he'd be able to enslave us. Let's talk to Dave in Ohio. Dave, you're on the air.
How you doing, Alex? How you doing, Sheriff?
Good, thanks.
Yes, I had come across something on YouTube on Congresswoman Giffords' YouTube channel. She has the part of them where you subscribe to other
channels. She has two friends, and one of them is the Grim Reaper Loughner.
Now, what is that? I mean, was that before or after? Was it hacked? I mean, that's
no.
Weird.
We've checked it, and it appears that it happened after the shooting. We've gone to the Google archive, and it looks like it wasn't there just a few weeks ago.
And I just have a message to the usurping, gun-grabbing slime filth of this country. Come and take it.
Well, that is the issue. If they do try to disarm us like the Nazis did, it's gonna be a serious situation. And that's what the globalists want, folks. Let's fix the country peacefully. Let's take our counties and cities back. Let's not let them use fake terror and hyped up events to scare us into submission, to give up our First Amendment or our Second Amendment or our property rights. Let's stand strong and come together. And that's why, and we're going to play this later, Congresswoman Giffords, she was talking about shattering the left-right paradigm, and for a Democrat was pretty conservative on the border and Second Amendment. And a lot of Democrats had been attacking her for voting against Nancy Pelosi and others.
Exactly. She was independent. She was an Arizonan by heart. And so she was standing for her people on several issues. Yeah, she was still a Democrat on some issues, but on some real key issues, she was very independent and very Arizona.
And a guy that all his friends called very liberal, extremely liberal, who liked to dress up like a girl, who liked to dress up like the Grim Reaper, you know, in between the time he was doing voodoo rituals in his own little voodoo temple in the backyard that Mommy and Daddy, I guess, knew about and let him have at 20-something years old. Now we're blamed for that. No, you will not blame us for that. If this guy claimed he was a Tea Partier and ran American flags up to the top of the pole every day, it's still not my fault what somebody else does. But to claim that this freak represents true conservatives is a fraud and a stinking joke. I'm going to go to our phone line system here, 877-789-ALEX. Let's talk to Mark in Texas and then JB. Mark, you're on the air with Sheriff Richard Mack. Okay, he's gone.
How are you?
Okay, Mark, you there? Yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Do y'all know about Joe Zamudio, the hero that ran into the action and subdued the gunman? He was packing. He had a gun on him. Yeah, I seen him on Fox News today, and they didn't know that at first. But when they found out, I mean, their jaws just dropped to the ground. And I'm sure they're going to try to bury this guy. I couldn't find him anywhere else. But he's on a YouTube video with Geraldo, did an interview with him. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, I'm glad you called, because I heard them say a man with a gun subdued him, and then we've been looking for days, and it's so buried we can't find it. Oh, we have it? Okay, well, then I'll take it if you got it. And if you got the Geraldo, we'll post it on InfoWars or Prison Planet. But they've really been trying to bury that, haven't they, Sheriff Max?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they did. They tried to bury it. However, he was just a little bit late getting there with his gun. They actually were trying to report that he had a gun, but it wasn't loaded. No, I don't believe that's the case. What happened is he went into the store and heard the shooting and went back out there, and then I think the suspect was reloading at the time, trying to put in another clip, and that's when the guy decided to tackle him, and then somebody helped him, and then a third person came over and sat on him as well. But what I would say, if any of the Tea Party people I know, and I've talked over at 100 Tea Parties across this country in the last year and a half, not once did anybody ever mention that we should kill politicians, that we should kill anybody, that this was a call to arms. No one has ever talked about that, Alex, at any of the Tea Party groups ever. They want, yes, they're mad, they're frustrated, but all they want is their Constitution back, and they want the politicians who swear an oath to actually follow the Constitution to pretend to do it sometimes, and they're sick and tired of watching this corruption, and they want some answers, and they want a change in our country. That's all they're asking for.
Okay, local radio is reporting that gunman was shot by defender in the crowd, and we have Fox News' Shepard Smith now reporting this, so our webmasters are going to get it up on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. But if they have successfully kept it quiet, that the guy actually shot him, or that may be a misreport. Sheriff Mack, again, you've got that he only came out and helped tackle him but didn't use his gun?
Correct. That's the story I've got at this point. But I think this comes back to a point you were making earlier. This idiot, this lunatic, thought he was going to be shot. He knows that people have guns in Arizona. He knows people have guns in Tucson. He expected to be that there would be security. He expected that after he got 4 or 5 off, that somebody was going to shoot him. This was his way to go out in a blaze of glory. He expected to be assassinated, and
Boy, can you imagine this spoiled brat living with Mommy and Daddy at 22? Can you imagine what he's going to like, a Supermax and then lethal injection?
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, he is so crazy, maybe he needs to just be in a mental institution. I mean, he's clearly completely a fruitcake.
Well, the people in his class at Pima Community College had reported him to the school, and teachers and security and others, saying this guy's a kook, he's violent, he's crazy, get him out of here. They took action, but law enforcement, I guess, never did.
Well, they went to his house, and they promised to put him in psychiatric care. And if they did, and if they did put him on the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, it's on the drug insert. It can trigger psychotic, violent breaks. Sheriff Mack, stay there, my friend. More calls straight ahead.